Trump outlines a significant Social Security cut in his 2020 budget. This past Monday, March 11, President Trump unveiled his fiscal 2020 budget proposal for the federal government. As a reminder, Trump's 2020 budget featured a lot of talking points, as presidential budgets often do, a number of which came under harsh criticism by members of the Democratic Party. In particular, political opponents of the president focused on a handful of proposed cuts to social programs, which go against Trump's campaign promises in 2016 not to touch so-called entitlement programs like Medicare and contained within the president's budget were calls for about $1.5 trillion in cuts to Medicaid over the next 10 years, which would be achieved by moving payouts to block grants, and $800, while Trump's budget proposal aims to curtail a number of perceived inefficiencies with the Social Security program. The bulk of the savings, $10 billion total, between 2020 and 2029 are expected to be realized from a single change to the Social Security disability insurance program. As of January 2019, according to the Social Security Administration (SSA), 10.15 million people were receiving a disability insurance benefit payment each month, 8.52 million of whom were long-term disabled workers. Of course, proving a long-term disability to the SSA, assuming you have to receive a disability benefit, isn't a flip of the switch process. Rather, the app. However, not all disability recipients file their claims with the SSA right away. Should you choose to, it should be noted that the SSA will subtract the 5-month waiting period from your filing, meaning you must apply for benefits 17 months or longer after the onset of your disability if you're to receive the full 12 months of retroactive disability pay. Trump's budget proposal for fiscal 2020 aims to have the amount of retroactive pay disabled persons can recover to 6 months from 12 months. Doing so would reduce, with Trump proposing $26 billion in cuts to Social Security between 2020 and 2029, you might be growing a bit concerned that bigger expenditure cuts might follow. But this is the point. To begin with, presidential budgets are often a rough draft from which Congress begins pushing and pulling to fit certain fiscal and political agendas. Secondly, a divided Congress practically when it comes to major social programs like Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. Democrats in the third, and finally, Trump is unlikely to take a hardline stance on keeping this provision in his budget, especially with his own election now less than 20 months away. Back in 2013, as Republicans, if you think you are going to change very substantially for the worse Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security in any substantial way, and at the same time you think you are going to win elections, it just really is not going to happen. What we have to do, in other words, Trump understands that direct changes to Social Security means and be worse off than they were before. Therefore, long story short, President Trump's budget is bound to hit on a number of talking points, but it's unlikely to incite any change to the existing structure of the Social Security program. The Motley Fool has the $16,728 Social Security bonus most retirees completely overlook. If you're like most Americans, you're a few years or more behind on your retirement savings. But a handful of
Raindrop, drop top, smoking, no cooking the hot pot. Fucking on your bitch, yeah, that. Looking up, open the park, pot.